10 separate immigration and asylum stories broke across Britain this month, from new appeal deadlines to a record-breaking Channel crossing to a Ministry of Defence scandal years in the making. Individually, each one is a policy footnote. Put together, they paint a much clearer picture of a system under genuine strain, being reformed, challenged, and criticised from almost every direction at once. Here's everything that's actually happening, story by story. Start with the courts. As of the 12th of August 2026, a new 24-week target came into force for the First-tier Tribunal to hear asylum and immigration appeals from non-detained foreign national offenders and people receiving asylum support. That might sound like a technical scheduling change, but the context makes it significant. The average wait for a judge to decide a case currently sits at around 67 weeks, nearly a year and a half. The government says faster appeals will speed up removals for people with no right to remain, free up accommodation, and save an estimated £6.9 billion. The catch is scale. More than 150,000 appeals are still waiting to be heard, and a separate immigration and asylum bill making its way through Parliament proposes creating an entirely new independent immigration appeals authority just to help work through the backlog alongside the existing tribunal system. Second, the interview process itself is changing. From the 3rd of August 2026, some asylum claims are being handled through what the Home Office calls merged registration, combining what used to be two separate steps, an initial screening interview and a later, more detailed substantive interview, into one single session. This faster process is reserved for claims the Home Office considers likely to be straightforward, including claims from a specific list of countries it deems generally safe. Among them, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. Officials say caseworkers are trained to spot signs of vulnerability, trauma, or trafficking, and that any case showing those signs gets pulled out of the fast-track process and handled under the normal, longer procedure instead. Third, a narrow but meaningful fix for families already in the system. A statement of changes laid before Parliament on the 9th of July 2026 now allows a child born in the UK while their parent holds graduate route or post-study work permission to apply as that parent's dependent. Previously, there was a real gap here. A child who arrived as a dependent on their parent's original student visa could carry that status forward. But a child actually born in the UK, after the parent had already switched onto the graduate route, had no clear route to lawful status at all. The fix only works from inside the UK, doesn't extend the parent's own permission, and doesn't turn the graduate route into any kind of path to permanent settlement. But it closes a gap that had been leaving some UK-born children in genuine legal limbo. Fourth, and this is the story making the most dramatic headlines, smugglers running channel crossings have shifted tactics, moving away from smaller boats toward what's now being called the mega dinghy. Boat sizes have climbed sharply in recent weeks, from 165 people crammed onto one vessel in July, up to 173 on another boat that later caught fire and capsized, and then, most recently, a single dinghy estimated to be roughly the size of a standard bus carrying 230 people across in one crossing. A UK minister actually pointed to that record-breaking number as evidence that enforcement is working, arguing that a joint UK-France patrol effort, backed by £662 million in UK funding over 3 years for more beach patrols and specialist riot police, has made smaller, more frequent crossings harder to pull off, pushing smugglers toward fewer, more overloaded boats instead. Critics point out that packing more than 200 people onto a single inflatable boat is also simply far more dangerous. Fifth, a warning from inside the healthcare sector itself. The Royal College of Nursing has published findings from 383 cases reported by its own members working in adult social care between January 2023 and December 2025, uncovering more than 1,200 separate incidents involving poor working conditions, demands for huge repayments, rewritten contracts, and direct threats tied to a worker's immigration status. The core problem, according to the RCN, is structural. The health and care worker visa ties a person's legal status directly to one specific employer's sponsorship certificate, which some employers have exploited as leverage. The RCN is calling for that 60-day window migrant workers currently have to find a new sponsoring employer, after losing a job, to be extended to 180 days, and for sponsorship itself to eventually move away from individual employers toward an industry-wide body instead. Sixth, a quieter but still notable story about the EU settlement scheme. Ongoing case reviews and Home Office correspondence have confirmed that a number of residents were granted the wrong category of status, most commonly pre-settled rather than settled status, due to caseworker errors made during the scheme's original high-volume rollout. Reporting on these cases indicates well over 100 people have received formal Home Office letters informing them their status was granted in error, giving them a short window, often as little as 14 days, to respond with evidence before a decision is reviewed. The Home Office has since published updated caseworker guidance specifically covering how these granted in error cases should be handled going forward. Seventh, on the economic side, the Migration Advisory Committee published its review of the government's proposed new temporary shortage list on the 23rd of July 2026, recommending just 28 occupations be included for an initial 18-month period, a significant cut from the 52 originally proposed. The roles recommended span advanced manufacturing, clean energy, digital and technology sectors, and critical infrastructure, including positions like engineering technicians, data analysts, and database administrators. If accepted, the list would run from the 1st of January 2027 through the 30th of June 2028, though the government hasn't yet confirmed whether it will adopt the committee's more limited recommendations or push for a broader list. Eighth, a troubling watchdog report on detention conditions. The Independent Monitoring Board's latest annual report on Yarl's Wood Immigration Removal Centre found that the flow of people through the facility rose by 28% in 2025 compared with the year before, and that 3 detainees were ultimately sectioned under the Mental Health Act and transferred to psychiatric hospitals during the year. The board specifically flagged concerns that a separate initiative, Operation Safeguard, introduced to relieve pressure on the prison estate, has resulted in men with high vulnerability and risk profiles being transferred into Yarl's Wood who previously would have simply remained under standard prison-based immigration controls. Inspectors also raised concerns about understaffing and a workforce skewed heavily male at a centre still primarily meant to accommodate vulnerable women. Ninth, family visa rules have tightened again, this time around child dependents applying under Appendix FM. Stricter verification now applies both to accommodation, confirmed through tenancy or title documents, and overcrowding checks against UK housing standards, and to care arrangements, assessed under the newer Appendix Children Framework. Caseworkers are now expected to directly examine who holds day-to-day responsibility for a child's care, check for any safeguarding concerns, and confirm the proposed living arrangement is genuinely stable, drawing on evidence such as birth or adoption certificates, custody orders, and supporting letters from schools or GPs naming the responsible parent. And finally, the story with the longest and most damaging paper trail. Parliament's Defence Committee has continued digging into the Ministry of Defence's 2022 Afghan data breach, in which a spreadsheet believed to hold roughly 150 applicant records for the Afghan relocations and assistance policy scheme was found to contain hidden data covering more than 18,500 separate applications. Information that could have put people who'd worked with British forces directly at risk from the Taliban. The committee's findings, published this year, don't describe it as a one-off human error. They call it a foreseeable systemic failure, driven by inappropriate tools, weak procedures, poor training, and what the report bluntly describes as a continuing cultural failure around basic data protection inside the ministry. Just as damning, the committee found that secrecy after the breach became its own problem, describing weak internal accountability beforehand and displaced democratic accountability afterward, concluding the Ministry of Defence simply lacked the expertise to safely run the UK's Afghan relocation schemes in the first place. 10 different stories, 10 different parts of the same system: courts, interviews, visas, smuggling routes, hospital wards, detention centres, and a government department still answering for a leak from years ago. None of them happened in isolation, and taken together, they're less a single news story than a snapshot of a system being pulled in every direction at once, tightened here, streamlined there, criticised almost everywhere, all in the space of a single month.